The old wooden chair creaked a mournful tune, a soundtrack to Thomas's simmering resentment. His father, Arthur, sat hunched over a worn photograph, his face etched with a lifetime of worry lines. Thomas, at 40, felt nothing but a dull ache of irritation. He'd come, begrudgingly, to visit his father, a ritual he performed more out of obligation than affection. Arthur had always been a disappointment, a shadow looming over his life. The weight of his sacrifices a constant reminder of his son's perceived failures. Arthur's hands, gnarled and spotted with age, trembled as he traced the outline of a younger Thomas in the photograph, a boy with bright eyes and a gap-toothed grin. The boy was gone, replaced by a man hardened by bitterness and self-pity. Thomas barely registered his father's presence, his gaze fixated on the chipped paint of the windowsill. Their conversations were strained, punctuated by awkward silences and barbed comments. Arthur would try, always trying, to bridge the chasm between them, offering stories of his youthful struggles, of how he'd worked tirelessly to provide for his son, sacrificing his own dreams to build a better life. Thomas would grunt in response, his eyes glued to his phone, his mind a million miles away. A heart attack struck Arthur unexpectedly, a sudden, brutal interruption to their tense routine. Thomas found himself in the sterile, cold environment of the hospital, watching his father struggle for breath, his face contorted in pain. The anger and resentment that had been his constant companions vanished, replaced by a raw, visceral fear of loss. He held his father's hand, the rough skin a stark contrast to the smoothness of his own. He saw not the disappointment he'd always perceived, but a lifetime of love, a love that had been squandered and ignored. He saw the sacrifices, the burdens silently carried, the quiet desperation in his father's eyes. Tears streamed down Thomas's face, tears of regret, of guilt, of a love he'd suppressed for so long. Arthur recovered, slowly, weakly. The recovery was a journey of healing for both of them. Thomas stayed by his father's side, reading to him, sharing stories of his own life, slowly revealing the vulnerabilities he'd hidden for years. He learned to listen, truly listen, to the stories of his father's life, hearing the love woven into every anecdote, every struggle, every sacrifice. He began to understand the depth of his father's love, the selfless devotion he'd taken for granted. Their relationship wasn't mended overnight. The scars of years of neglect remained, but a new understanding blossomed, a fragile tenderness that replaced the bitterness. There were still awkward silences, but they were different now, filled with the unspoken acknowledgement of shared pain and the promise of a future built on forgiveness and love. One day, Thomas found Arthur looking at the same photograph, a gentle smile playing on his lips.